Hey, Conor of Neversink Farm here, and today I want to talk about the weed-free farm. It's incredibly important to me. It's something that I feel passionate about, that every farm can achieve that concept, and I want to tell you how. But first, let's talk about what that means. Now, there's no such thing as a true weed-free farm. It is on every farm. There's seeds everywhere. They are in every piece of soil, in every hoop house. So what we're actually doing is managing them. But the goal in mind is for no weeds. You know, that's always the goal. And what does that mean? Well, that means that it's part of everything we do every day on the farm is managing those weeds and making sure that we're keeping them so that you don't see them, so that you have the appearance of being weed-free. Because not letting weeds go to seed isn't a system, right? It's not a management program. Hand weeding is not a management program. It can be part of it, and it's certainly something that no farm can avoid. It's definitely there, but it needs to be attacking the problem at its base. The weed-free farm is that when you achieve the appearance of no weeds, when you look around and you don't see them and you have to look for them, this affects everything on your farm. It affects harvesting, it affects crop quality, it affects your size of your crops, it affects all your different management practices across the farm. It affects your bottom line and how much labor you're going to need, how long it takes to turn over beds. It's going to affect so many things. It really just comes down to profit. Neversink Farm is, one of the reasons it's successful is, because it's efficient and has systems, and I use those efficiency and systems to try to keep things weed-free. And that's why the farm is so successful. How do you get there? What does it look like? Because if you're staring at a field of weeds, it's hard to imagine. And I've been there. When I started farming, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be staring at a field of weeds. You have to start by removing all of them. And this is the hardest thing for people to grasp, because they're looking for an easy answer. And there isn't an easy answer to starting weed-free. You can tarp it. Tarping is something that's not involved in a Neversink system in the sense of weed control, because it actually doesn't work. It's not going to kill your weeds. It's time-consuming. It's heavy with all the rocks. It's just not a system that works very well. I understand it's very popular, but it's not really a weed management system. It is a pause button that you can put pause on a field and say, I'm not going to deal with it for a while. And then it will just put the pause on things germinating. Things may germinate, a week, or two after you put it down. But after that, things aren't going to happen. And once you pull it off, wait a couple of weeks and the weeds will be back. So it's really a pause button. So it's something you can do for very long term. But for your regular management practices, it's not part of it. But to start, to clear a field and make sure that you don't have any weeds, you can put a tarp down, but you have to leave it there for an incredibly long period of time, depending on where you are. And that's one of the methods for removing all of the weeds. The other thing is just pulling them out and make sure the roots are coming out. Because if you don't do that, they're just going to continue to come back. I do get questions like, well, I burned the grass and it just keeps coming back. It's going to come back, because no management program is about getting rid of perennials. That's something that has to be done up front. And what you're doing is you're managing that state of being perennial and large weed free. Once you get back into that state of having large weeds and perennials, then you've got to put the hard work in getting back to the weed-free state so that you can manage it once again. Because it's all about managing that state. So if you're at a farm and they have big weeds, they're not actually managing weeds. All they're doing is just holding it at a threshold and just pulling them out and tilling it in and the rest of it. You need to have it weed free in order to manage it, right? That's the starting point, because it's not weeding. What weed management is all about is about precision cultivation, not about weeding. There's some hand weeding in there that's, manageable on a smaller scale, maybe after you turn over beds, or a few here and there when they weren't gotten through cultivation, but it's not the whole system, right? Precision cultivation is what it's about. Your goal is to disturb every square inch of soil. And to do that fast, right, you're going to have heads that fit perfectly between those plants, right? Where the word precision comes in, right? That's where it's precisely fitting in there, so that, you obviously want a little bit of play, but you're using these precision heads, right, which are the wire, the collinear, to get every square inch of soil. And that's really what precision cultivating is about. It's about getting every square inch of soil on that bed and disturbing it so that all weeds that have germinated into that thread stage are killed and die. And when you do it at that stage, you're going to kill 99% of the weeds, right? As they get bigger, the percentage of how many you kill goes down. That's why you want to hit it early. And the other important thing about precision cultivating is it has to be done regularly, right? It doesn't mean it has to be on a schedule, but it has to be part of your system, right? It needs to be something that is considered every week, just like harvesting or planting or seeding. You need to be able to do that fast. And the way to do that fast is by having straight rows that are planted straight, that the distance between each plant is equal, so that you can, walk at a really fast speed down the row, just holding your cultivator in the right position and dragging it along. And then if you're doing the crosshatch, you're just coming like this. So straight rows, evenly planted, and then having an assortment of heads. So if you're using collinears, you have a different assortment of widths. Okay? And for wire hose, which are really the best precision cultivator there is wire. It never needs sharpening. It just works really, really well. And then you just have different widths so that you can fit it in between your straight rows and how far apart they are, and just boogie down the row, and then just switch out as you're moving along for the different crops that you have on a small scale farm, right? And with this tool, you're just carrying them all with you as you go. I'm using a tool like this for all the beds, right? I only need a set of wires, and I need some collinears, which can go under drip tape if you have it, or can go under the canopy, right? You have 2 lettuce heads, can go under the canopy a bit. So collinears, set of that, and set of wire weeders. And that's going to do all of the regular bed cultivation that you need. Beyond that, there may be some spot cultivation where you're just grabbing like an offset head, and that's just really finishing it up, before you hand weed, right? You want to walk around with maybe an offset. And that's just going to be, instead of cultivating all the ground, you're just going to go and kill all the small stuff you missed with the offset, which has 1 inch and then a 4 inch, so you can get everything. And you're just walking around and looking for them. Then the final thing is hand weeding. And you're obviously avoiding that because you're trying to do everything beforehand, right? Your precision cultivation before. And hopefully you're getting 95 to 99% of your weeds, and that your hand weeding becomes very minimal. And that's really the goal, right? You're not going to avoid it altogether, and you don't want to avoid it altogether because you can't let weeds grow, right? Like what I said before about not letting weeds go to seed isn't a practice, because isn't a good management practice, because every weed seed will germinate, every little weed will grow into a big weed, and every big weed will go to seed. It's just inevitable. So just leaving it there to say, well, just hope it doesn't go to seed, it's going to go to seed. Managing that weed-free state is really, really what's important. So I'm using the wire, the collinear, and then for the paths, that's the only place I'm using the wheel hoe. I've tried to use wheel hoes in many different circumstances in the beds, but unless you're growing, a lot of the same crop, half an acre of one crop or an acre of one crop, I find it's just not as fast on a small scale as it is using a long handle tool where you're just walking really fast down the rows, because you can switch things out faster, you can adjust quicker with it, you can, manage every circumstance on a bed better than you can with a wheel hoe. The promise of the wheel hoe just doesn't pan out, I think. But for the paths, it's really ideal. And if you have a lot of the same crop. Let's talk about the tools I don't use for cultivating and why. And I think it'll give a better understanding of what precision cultivating is. The primary one is like a scuffle hoe, right? And I have one, right? People love this thing, right? And that's because it's very heavy duty and is less of a cultivator and more of a weeder, right? Because you have it at an angle from you and you have it far away from you, right? And that enables you to put a lot of force on where you can almost rip up grass with it. And I think that's what people do with it, right? Like they're just getting big weeds and chopping them up, right? But that's not precision, right? I'm already in one spot for a while trying to chop up some weeds, right? I'm not running back and forth down beds like this, right? One wrong move and you're going to pull out your plants, which is why it's not a precision cultivator. This is like an emergency tool to kill big weeds. It's really what it is. The only place I use it on my farm is as a reach tool. If we have to reach and get the edge of the greenhouse from inside, right? Here's the bed along the edge, and I need to get along the edge, right? But you can still do that with a wire weeder, but in precision cultivation on a weed-free farm, when you're trying to maintain no weeds, this isn't the tool. It's not the right tool for that. It's more of a weeder. But remember, every time you cut weeds that are big, the roots live and you'll be back again with this. So it doesn't end your work, right? You're just mowing the lawn. You got to mow the lawn every week because you're not killing the grass, right? You're just cutting it. You're just cutting it at the soil surface. So it's not a precision cultivator, and it has very little use when it comes to keeping a farm weed free. Even though it is popular, it's just not a very good tool in that sense. I use the wheel hoe with the 12-inch blade for the paths. My paths are 14 inches. One thing, when we show a lot of pictures of the farm is there's not a lot of weeds. And it's something I do well. Like I certainly didn't have to grow spinach or, the best tomatoes or, who knows, right? But certainly keep the weeds down. And very successful at earning a really nice profit in a small space. And part of that is keeping the weeds down. Using wheel hoes inside beds on a small scale farm like mine it's just not ideal, especially if you have 50-foot beds, you have a lot of different crops, different spacings. It just doesn't work well. It's just not, you have to have everything set up perfectly and get that thing set up, and then you can maybe go down the few rows that you have. If you have a lot of, rows and rows of kale at, medium growth stage, then yeah, certainly. But is it worth the money when you can just, use something like this? I don't think so. experimented with it and just haven't found a place where it really makes a lot of sense. You know, certainly it works. It's not that the wheel hoe doesn't work, but I don't think it's necessary to be efficient and managing a weed-free farm. But one thing that is important, and that is straight rows. Because if you don't have straight rows, it doesn't matter whether you have a wheel hoe or you have a precision cultivator, you're not going to be able to do it fast. They have to be even. And I used to use a rake, but I didn't find a rake it was very slow putting the grid out for it. There's dibblers, we have to change stuff, and that's very slow. And I need something that I can give to workers so that it's quick and easy and just they can roll it. And that's where the gritter comes in. So the gritter is just going to have perfectly straight. It rolls straight. It has the same spacing all the time, whether it's in between the rows or in between the plants within the rows. It's always the same so that you can cultivate super fast because it's just unbelievably straight. And that is incredibly important for precision cultivation, is that it's fast. You know, we've tried a lot of different stuff, whether it's rakes or dibblers and all of that, and just nothing seemed to work quickly and efficiently and very easy to communicate to a worker without having to explain it every single time. You can have like a bed roller that has dibbles in it, but then you have to take the dibbles out to be a bed roller, and I use my bed roller every day, so who's taking the dibbles out, who's, you know, do they have to put them on, then take them off, and put them on, then take them off, and what's the pattern? It's just, it drives me crazy. So I like tools that are specific for one purpose so that we can move fast, right? Instead of a wheel hoe, I'd rather have a way to mark out my beds nice and straight so that I can use something easy. All right, so part of the weed-free system when you're trying to maintain your weeds, maintain that weed-free beds, I think the primary weapon can be the flame weeder, because this is when you're hitting blank beds, right? You're doing precision cultivation on beds that are planted, but when they're not planted or before the seed germinates, the flame weeder is really the best tool, right? It's worth every penny you invest in a flame weeder, because I use them weekly. Any bed that's empty or has been seeded but hasn't been germinated yet, I'll just move this up and down the bed, kill all the weeds. And the nice thing about this one is on a small scale farm, I have, you know, an empty bed here and then a full bed and then an empty bed and a full bed, and I just need to sneak in the middle. And this one I can just carry around the farm and get it into all those spots and be able to flame weed whenever I want. A wider version is better if you have a larger space to do, lots of rows, then it makes sense. But for small scale, it's just nice to have one that's small and gets in between. But this is really, you know, and again, this is going after thread stage, tiny little weeds, right? This isn't about burning big weeds that you see. Those have to be pulled out. This is about getting the small ones. But instead of cultivating the bed, what this is going to do, you can get the whole bed itself, and it's much faster, right? Because all you're doing is rolling it along. You don't have to cultivate everything, right? So this is used blank beds and seeded beds for stale seed bedding, and precision cultivation is done once you have a crop planted, right? But every bed is done regularly, right? So you go get all the blank beds done with this, then you go back, grab your mutineer, go in there, cultivate all of the beds with plants on them, grab the wheel hoe, do all the paths regularly, all the time, just to maintain that weed-free farm.